latest AP rankings released earlier today, following a pair of wins over Indiana and Iowa. Wisconsin dropped 5 spots to number 16 in the AP Top 25, highest they've been since the December 2nd poll. They're the third highest ranked team from the Big Ten. Badgers will play only once this week at number 7, Purdue on Saturday. Boilermakers lead the Big Ten at 11-2. Wisconsin 2 games back to the tie for fourth place. Cherry the Bucks, they're hosting Golden State tonight, the second game of a back-to-back. Milwaukee coming off a game against Philly where they hit 24 three-pointers. Most of the single game this season, something Doc Rivers wants more of.
We did it one quarter the other night, and then we got away from it. And that's why you missed me. So, I just couldn't understand why we would go away from it for the life of me. And tonight we kept doing it, and it's really important. We have so many guys that can make shots. We should do it every night, and the better we get at it, the better we're going to be as a team.
Rivers and the Bucks can be without Giannis Antetokounmpo at least through the All-Star break. He's dealing with a calf strain that kept him out of the last 2 games, and he will not play in the All-Star game. If you're interested in a rewarding career with a strong Wisconsin company, Rural Mutual Insurance is looking to add to their growing team of successful employees and agents. Apply online today at ruralmutual.com/careers.
Rural Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Well, the football season officially over with the Eagles taking down the Chiefs last night in Super Bowl. Up next, the offseason. It's going to get going at the NFL Combine later this month in Indianapolis. Free agency will begin 1 month from today, and the NFL Draft in Green Bay starts April 24th. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heil.
I can go next. I think Philly's going to win. And I don't want
Philly's got the better roster.
Philly's got the significantly better roster, which is why it's really difficult for me to pick the Chiefs. I want the Chiefs to win. I hope they win. I don't like Philly. I would rather see Kansas City win 3 in a row. This, to me, feels like Tampa Bay, Kansas City in 2021. I think we're going to watch this for a couple of minutes and be like, Philly's D-line is nasty. I think they're going to throw everything out of whack. I just think that Philly's roster is that much better. So Mahomes going to have to be unbelievable, and then Philly's going to have to make a bunch of mistakes, I think, for that talent disparity to matter. So I'll take Philly, even though I don't like it.
The bench is empty. The teams converge, and this one is over. And the Eagles have beaten the Chiefs convincingly in Super Bowl 59, 40-22.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
I say this all the time, and I hear Cowherd say it too. I guess it's something that I kind of stole from Cowherd, but I stole it from Cowherd because I like it and I agree with it. I don't really care that much about being right. I just don't really care that much. I don't think that's why you listen. I don't think you listen to the show thinking, oh, I got to hear what Grant has to say about this game because I know he's going to predict it. Like that's not even fun. Even if I could predict things, there's no fun in that. I don't give out picks. We don't talk betting angles a lot. Like I don't care about guessing what's going to happen. I don't think that's interesting. But, every once in a while when you really nail one to the cross, I mean, that comment that you heard, that was from me last week on Bill's show when we made our picks. I nailed it. So why leave it out of the show? Every once in a while, right? A little victory lap. It's never really the focus of the show. I remind you of that often. And I think if you listen, you know that that's not really the point of the show. But I did feel good that I kind of knew how this game was going to go. And I think I hit it right on the head. I said on Friday on this show and on Bill's show, that clip was from Bill's show because I knew exactly where it was when I went back to get it. I thought we were going to get a couple minutes into this game. I don't know, 20 minutes, a quarter, a half a quarter, some very small amount of time into the game. And I thought we were all going to go, this is going to be a crummy game. Because Kansas City just had no answer. Can't get it blocked. Guys can't get open. You're basically dead in the water. You're like a boat without a propeller and without steering control. You can't do anything. And it reminded me so much of Kansas City and Tampa Bay a couple of years ago, which is the comp that I used. It felt like we were watching the same game. So I had to put that in the intro. I'm not obsessed with being right. I don't always have to twist what I'm saying. And I'm not someone who refuses to ever be wrong. I'm wrong all the time. That's not really the point of the show. The point is, hey, that game last night, that was crazy. Let's talk about it. That's what the show is for. But every once in a while when you really nail one, I'll take a small victory lap. That was only like 60 seconds. That was a 60-second victory lap. I think I'm owed that today. This is the Wisco Sports Show. My name is Grant Bills. Hope you enjoyed the Super Bowl yesterday. If nothing else, maybe you hung out with some friends and you had some food and you enjoyed the holiday of the Super Bowl, at least, even though the game wasn't much. Happy to be back in the studio. You know, when you operate at such a high level like me, you put on such a good show. You know, you're used to having all these buttons and everything's back where it's supposed to be. We're back to normal today. That's a joke, by the way. When you operate on such a high level like I do, you know, it's nice to have your buttons and your things. So it's nice to be back after a week in New Orleans. Really fun week. And if you missed last week's show or shows, they're all on YouTube. And I actually cut out some of the best interviews, and I'm still cutting more. I'm going to post the Thomas Dimitroff interview tonight. If you missed that, I have a playlist on the YouTube account where the show live streaming right now on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. But I made a little playlist because YouTube lets you do that. Some of the best interviews from Radio Row, and I'm still going to be adding to that throughout the week. So if you missed last week, there's plenty of ways to go back and consume. But now we're back to normal, and I'm excited to get back to taking your phone calls tonight as we react to the Super Bowl, yes, but we use the Super Bowl and the champion Eagles as kind of a tool with which we can go back and kind of pick apart and talk about the NFL season that is now concluded, as you heard Zach say in the update. So that's kind of the goal for tonight's show. We'll also do the Monday mailbag. So submit your questions. Excuse me. I had to have a Coke Zero this afternoon because I forgot my K-Cups, and I am struggling with it from a digestive standpoint, although Coke Zero is also a delicious option for a little afternoon caffeine. Sorry, I got a little hiccup. So you can submit your questions for the Monday mailbag. GrantBills21@gmail.com. Already a couple of in, but you have another hour and 40 minutes or so to submit those questions, and I'll take your calls as well after our first break. 608-321-1670. This Super Bowl was a bummer in so many ways. I can make a list. In fact, I did make a list of the ways in which this game was a bummer. Nobody wanted to see the Chiefs again. You know, no one, like everyone was rolling their eyes. Everyone wanted Buffalo. But a lot of people also hate the Eagles. You know what I mean? So it's not like we were provided with an exciting alternative like maybe Jaden Daniels would have been. I would have liked to see the Rams again. Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay. That's a very likable team. I, of course, would have liked to see our Green Bay Packers. So it's not just that no one wanted to see the Chiefs again. We weren't even given a team on the other side which we could cheer for with enthusiasm. It's like, oh God, it's a, you know, what's the South Park election joke? What is a douche and a turd sandwich? Like, that's what we had. Nobody liked either choice. So, and to boot, it was a rematch. It was a rematch of two teams who nobody likes from a couple years ago. So it's like, not only do we hate both of these teams, we just watched both of these teams 48 months ago, 2 Super Bowls ago. And it wasn't just a rematch between teams. It was a script rematch. We had watched that same game 4 years ago now, when Tampa Bay and Kansas City was in the Super Bowl. It was the same game played by two teams that we'd already watched play, neither of which anybody likes. So no one really had a good time yesterday. No one really enjoyed it that much. The game wasn't even competitive. It couldn't even give us any juice or any excitement or any controversy, right? So a rematch, a script rematch, and two teams that nobody likes. And then a game that wasn't competitive and close. Like, pretty much worst case scenario. It's still a Super Bowl, so we're going to watch and we're going to make chicken wings and dip chips into lots of different chips. You wouldn't believe how much taco dip costs in 2025, by the way. My God. I know eggs. Everyone's bent out of shape that eggs are expensive, and they are. Not downplaying the price of eggs or, you know, whatever. Everything's expensive, but like taco dip, I don't know what's in that that's so expensive, but my God, they charge an arm and a leg for it. But I bought some because I need something to dip while watching the Super Bowl. Despite the game being a blowout and a rematch and not that entertaining, I know many took enjoyment in watching Kansas City lose. It was so therapeutic to so many people who've wanted to see Kansas City lose all season, and they've continued to squeak by and win by the skin of their teeth over and over again. So I know a lot of people were like, oh, this is great. I get to watch Kansas City lose. I didn't even get to enjoy that because I don't really have a problem with Kansas City. I don't have an issue with them. So I couldn't even pick through the rubble and the wreckage of this awful game and find the silver lining of, well, it's fun to watch the Chiefs lose, because I get no joy from watching the Chiefs lose. I don't care about the Chiefs. Like, this was a zero gain. There was nothing to be gained yesterday afternoon from me and from many in this matchup, but at least the one silver lining remaining that a lot of you had watching the Chiefs is I didn't even get that because I'm indifferent on the Chiefs. Now, the Eagles are awesome. and they're a deserving champion. I'm not walking away from the Super Bowl yesterday thinking, well, that, the right team didn't win. Every once in a while you have one of those games where it's like, I don't know if that was truly the best team. I don't know if that was truly the most deserving champion, right? Sometimes we walk away. Not at all. Philly's unbelievable and a very deserving champion and probably the correct team. I think they would have beaten the brakes off of Buffalo. I think they would have beaten the brakes off of Baltimore. They beat the brakes off the Packers, even though it didn't. I know a lot of people are talking about, well, the Packers played them close. I think we're misremembering a little bit. The Rams were the team that played them the closest. I think if there wouldn't have been snow in Philly a couple Sundays ago, I think the Rams might have beat them. But other than that matchup, I don't think you can look at Philly and their body of work over the last couple of months and draw any conclusion other than that they are the deserving champion and the best team and the team that deserves to hoist the Lombardi at the end of the 2024-2025 NFL season. They're stacked top to bottom. Put it this way, and this is what I brought up to Bill earlier. The Eagles led Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs by, at one point in this game, 34 points. They were up 34-0 in this game. The Eagles led Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid by 34 points. I know the rest of the Chiefs, not world beaters, right? This certainly isn't the most talented Kansas City team that Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes have been on, but it's still Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. The Eagles led the Chiefs by 34 points. And I'm still not sure that the Eagles have a great quarterback or a great coach. And I don't say that to rip their coach or their quarterback. They're champions. I say that to build up the rest of the roster. Do you know how friggin' good you have to be to lead by 35 points in the Super Bowl? Now, if the other team's, quarterback gets injured or something wild happens, I suppose it could happen. But to lead Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid by 34 points and to not really have a quarterback or a head coach that's known as elite, that's wild, isn't it? Champions, teams that win a Lombardi trophy, teams that win Super Bowls are often defined by their quarterback and coach, coach and quarterback, quarterback and coach. It's always, I feel like where the conversation starts on sports talk, at least a lot of the time. Sometimes, defense wins championships, lines of scrimmage, we talk about, but it feels like a lot of the conversations about the best teams start with coach and quarterback. That's the duo. We start there. Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes for a long time, Tom Brady, Bill Belichick, a couple of years ago, Matt Stafford, Sean McVay, right? And when teams come up short, we often nitpick the coach or we nitpick the quarterback. For example, Joe Burrow a couple of years ago in the Super Bowl. Well, probably didn't have the best coach, right? Zach Taylor maybe a little weaker than Sean McVay, right? Or Kyle Shanahan. We all agree. I think Kyle Shanahan's great. I think he's actually become underrated at this stage in his career. He's been in 2 Super Bowls. His quarterback was Jimmy Garoppolo, and his quarterback was Brock Purdy. So when talking about that team, you go coach, quarterback. Coach is great. Quarterback, maybe still a little ways to go. The first Rams Super Bowl, McVay's unbelievable, but Jared Goff's not good enough. You know what I mean? I think with the Bills moving forward, Josh Allen's unbelievable. Wow, he's so great. Could they do better at coach? Right? Could we do better than I almost said Sean McVay, but Sean McDermott? Right? Coach, quarterback. It always starts there. And if a team comes up short, we often center ourselves on either the coach or the quarterback, one of those two not holding up their end of the bargain, right? The Eagles were up 35 points on Mahomes with a coach that most people don't believe is that great and a quarterback who most people don't believe is amongst the NFL's elite. It's not to say that he's bad, but it's not like sports talk shows today are leading with, oh my God, what is the NFC going to do about Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni? You know what I mean? That's not Reid Mahomes. That's not Brady Belichick. That's not McVay Stafford. It's Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni. That's how good this roster is. That's how stacked this roster is. Top to bottom, front to back on all sides of the ball. Right? And I saw a lot of people tweeting. I actually think Bukowski was the first person I saw tweet this. Many tweeted it then throughout the game. Howie Roseman should be the MVP of the Super Bowl. Because every time you try to, well, Jalen Hurts could be MVP. Well, then you look at the performance of DeVonta Smith, or you look at the performance of, the defensive line as a whole. Or what about a huge play from Cooper DeJean, a huge play from Zach Bond, well, who's in charge of amassing all of those players? Who is in charge of making those trades and signing those players and making those draft picks? It's Howie Roseman, the Eagles general manager, right? So I think Jalen Hurts deserves a ton of credit I still wouldn't put him in a group with Mahomes or Allen or Lamar Jackson. I don't know where he stacks up against Jaden Daniels. I feel like 1 year sample size is probably a little bit too small. I think Jalen Hurts is better than most, but I think clearly not as good as the elite, the top 4 or 5 guys, most of them in the AFC, Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, Lamar Jackson. We can argue and debate about Justin Herbert. I don't want to waste time with that. It's the Chargers. I don't want to waste time with that today. But I think Jalen Hurts is good. I think he deserves a lot of credit. And if I was an Eagles fan, I'm not. But if I was, I'd be like, what more do you need to see? He was unbelievable in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. We could be living in a world today, by the way, where Jalen Hurts just won his second Super Bowl. And in both of them, he would have beaten Patrick Mahomes. What kinds of things would we be saying about Jalen Hurts? Maybe how would perception differ in that world compared to the world we live in, where most people are like, yeah, Jalen Hurts is pretty good. Well, what if he had won that game 2 years ago that kind of felt like a coin flip, right? That Super Bowl 2 years ago, it kind of felt like that one could have gone either way. It came down to the wire. There was a holding call, whatever. We could be living in a world today where both Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts have won 2 Super Bowls in 3 years. And I don't know that would, wholesale change how we feel about either. I still don't think we'd be putting Nick Sirianni up there with Andy Reid and Sean McVay. And I still don't think we'd be putting Jalen Hurts up there with Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes. But I bet he'd be a lot closer had he simply won a game that kind of felt like a coin flip 2 years ago. But I'm just so struck and so impressed. And as a sports fan, a little bewildered and a little annoyed as a Packers fan at how good of a roster Howie Roseman was able to build through trades, through signings, through draft picks, to the point where his quarterback is good. Maybe not great. His head coach is fine. And they led Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid by 35 points. And if that doesn't tell you all you need to know about the rest of the roster, I don't know what possibly could. And I'm going to repeat that a lot throughout tonight's show because that's the main point. That's the sticking point for me. They led Patrick Mahomes in the biggest game of the year by 35 points, and I don't think their quarterback or coach are that amazing. And that just speaks so loudly to the talent and the depth and the dynamism, the playmaking ability of the rest of the roster. Really impressive. Philly's a deserving champion, no doubt. Really, really good team. I wish the game would have been a little bit more entertaining, but they can't all be instant classics. I get it. 608-321-1670. If you have thoughts on the game, or as the show moves along, once we talk about the game, we can talk a little bit about, well, what did yesterday's game and what do the Eagles teach us about the rest of the season? And I suppose most importantly, our Green Bay Packers. I want to discuss that as well. 608-321-1670. Your call's next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
He's unbreakable. And he proved that this and this for an athlete will always matter more than anything else. And you have to give Jalen Hurts credit. This is a young man that was benched in the national championship game, benched by the greatest college football coach of all time. Didn't break him. Had to go back in the year later, transfers. And listen, I owe publicly Jalen Hurts an apology. I was probably one this year who's been the hardest on him. I'll go back a couple weeks ago when I said the passing game's not good enough right now, and I don't think it's going to get better. All he's done since then is have his two best games of the year on the two biggest stages that the game has been on, the NFC Championship game and the Super Bowl.
That's Dan Orlovsky this morning, and I agree. I don't know exactly how to rank Jalen Hurts, and I don't know exactly, how high he should be, but probably higher than most have him. I still don't think he's Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, Herbert. But man, if I was an Eagles fan, I'd be like, well, why not? He just won a Super Bowl, played amazing down the stretch in the playoffs. And something I mentioned in the first segment, he easily could have won that Super Bowl 2 years ago. So he'd be 2-0 against Patrick Mahomes in his 2 Super Bowl appearances and would have played outstanding in both. If I was an Eagles fan, I think I'd bang the Jalen Hurts is elite drum pretty hard. I think I would be making the case that he belongs to be up there with the best quarterbacks in football. As a Packers fan, I still can't get there, but probably deserves a little bit more credit than he's being given. And I'm part of that problem because I began the show tonight saying, hey, the Eagles, I don't think are that great at quarterback. And I think they're not that great at head coach. And yet the rest of the team was still good enough for them to lead Patrick Mahomes by 35 points. What a team, and a really deserving champion. So I want to talk about yesterday's game. I want to talk about what yesterday's game and the champion Eagles tell us about the rest of the season, all of it. And because the game was so crummy yesterday, normally I wouldn't do this. I will also be accepting takes about the halftime show. Make it a good take. Make it specific. Don't just talk about it to talk about it. But given the game was so uncompetitive, I will open the door to that as well tonight. 608-321-1670 to your calls as promised. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Grant, what a big game for this weekend.
Wisconsin.
I mean, to see Wisconsin go into Iowa when they needed a win and destroy Fran McCaffrey, you just love to see it.
I'm sorry, I stepped on your toes. I should have let you keep going there. It was a great game, and Cone, you know what I liked? They sealed the deal down the stretch with their defense. That's something we haven't seen enough from this team.
No, not at all. And I know you couldn't really take calls last week, but I mean, Carter Gilmore, like, where has this guy been all year? Or, like, just the confidence shooting from three. You see him doing a little back down, getting more active in the offense. I just love to see it.
You know where he's been, Cone? He's been developing, honing his craft, growing as a young man by going to class and being with his teammates and being a true student athlete. That's what he's been up to. Let me go ahead and answer that question that I know you didn't design to have an answer, but that's how I'll answer that question. He's been a true student athlete, developing and growing and maturing behind the scenes.
Amen. And, he's going to walk out of his years in Madison with a great education, a great degree, and great memories. And he said this last week, he is just an ultimate Badger. So I love to see it. Credit to Carter Gilmore. Continuing on the apology tour, I think we all owe Nick Sirianni an apology. I mean, this guy was just getting battered all for the last, 18 months, saying he can't coach, he can't keep a team together. They looked pretty good last night. The players all seem to love him. So Nick Sirianni, I think we owe him an apology.
I think so too. I think the thing that he probably gets most credit for with yesterday's game is he had his guys ready to come out and kick ass in a weird environment where it's all Chiefs, three-peat, Mahomes, Kelsey, Taylor Swift. Like, his dudes came ready to play. And we're the first people, Cone, to rip a head coach when the team doesn't show up ready to play. I think that's probably what he deserves most credit for yesterday, because he's not calling the plays. Howie Roseman hired the coordinators, but the ethos and the energy and the aggressiveness of his team, I think he gets credit for that, or he should, because that's how we'd handle just about every other coach, right?
100%. Couldn't agree more. And then last thing I'll leave you with, a little litmus test.
Sure.
Going into next year, would you rather have Jordan Love or Jalen Hurts as your team's quarterback?
So this is interesting. I think, Cone, that's a great call, and I appreciate you bringing up Badgers hoops as well. I think both at this moment in time are roster dependent. I don't think either Jordan Love or Jalen Hurts are going to be elite contending quarterbacks without specific talented rosters and schemes built around them. That's not really a rip. There's only 2 or 3 quarterbacks, maybe. Like, Joe Burrow was unbelievable this year. Didn't win dick because his defense wasn't any good and his coaching was kind of a mess. So there's only 2 or 3 players who are talent and scheme independent. So to say that, well, Jordan Love and Jalen Hurts, they need guys around him, that's true of just about everybody. I don't know. I think we're going to learn. If the Packers are able to add talent, both in the draft, but maybe acquire a guy in free agency or in trade and build up this team around Jordan Love, and he's healthy next year, I think I'll be able to better answer that question. But Jalen Hurts is now proven twice. If you put the right formula around him, he can show up and do his job in the biggest games. Jordan Love is yet to prove that. I don't know if I'll go so far as to say that for that reason, I'd rather have Jalen Hurts. But I guess if I had to bet a mortgage, Cone, it would be a lot smarter at this moment in time to bet it on Hurts, right? Because we've seen it twice. 608-321-1670, Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Grant, Bills, happy Monday. How are we doing?
I'm doing excellent, Vagabond John. I did not expect for this to be you. I almost mentioned the mobility of Jalen Hurts, and I was going to save that for later on in the show. Is that something that you've planned to discuss? Because that's something that you've been talking about.
Well, I had a talk track in mind, but your last comment there just kind of pissed me off kind of a lot.
Okay.
Jalen Hurts has 4 years straight of 600 or more yards of rushing, right?
Uh-huh.
Jordan Love, in a healthy season, has 300 yards. Just to put it in perspective, last night in the frickin' Super Bowl, when they're up 35, Jalen Hurts rushed for nearly 50% of Jordan Love's career total in rushing yards, right? So just in one Super Bowl, right? So just to put it in perspective, I'm a little pissed off at Packer fans today for not waking up and saying, Jordan Love, we all want to talk about Jordan Morgan, right? But you can talk about another Jordan Love.
I haven't
If you draft Jalen Hurts instead of Jordan Love, right? Because they were drafted the same year, just 15 to 16 picks apart. If you draft Jalen Hurts, I think the Packers are in a much better spot because I think Jalen Hurts is a hell of a lot better quarterback in the NFL than Jordan Love. And the biggest reason, last night we saw Jalen Hurts hit a couple of deep balls. Okay, great. Jordan Love can hit a couple of deep balls. Jalen Hurts, what's his weakness? Once in a while, he's inconsistent and he can't hit the intermediate passes. Well, Packer fans, we sure as hell know that. But the biggest difference is Jalen Hurts ran for 80 yards in a playoff game. And sure, Jordan Love got hurt in week 1 with an MCL, right? But Jordan Love has proven he's a liability, right? He can't protect himself. He can't keep himself healthy to be able to use his rushing ability.
I mean, Hurts has been banged. It's not like Hurts has been a perfect, clean bill of health. I understand what you're saying, right? Keeping yourself healthy and playing well through injury, that's a skill, right? So for Packers fans to completely and totally dismiss offhand some of the limitations of Jordan Love last year, well, he was hurt. Well, sometimes you're hurt. So I'll meet you halfway there. I think that's part of playing quarterback in the NFL is maintaining and still playing at a high enough level when you're banged up. I get it. It's about more than rushing. These aren't running backs. Rushing is a part of it, but a big part of it, Vagabond John, and I made a mental note of this last night. I'll give you an example. When the Eagles are in 2nd and 12, right? And Jalen Hurts drops back to pass and there's nothing there, his ability to just say, screw it, take off and turn what would be a 3rd and 12 into a 3rd and 3, that's huge. And he did that a time or two last night. And that's not something that Jordan Love has done. That's such a large part of his game that helps the Eagles stay on track and to stay in 3rd manageable and 4th and manageable where they're so good. Jordan Love doesn't really have that. So to turn a 2nd and 12 nothing play into a 3rd and extremely manageable just because you can scramble, that's huge. And that's something that Jordan Love hasn't done. You're exactly right.
And Jalen Hurts has multiple years over 700 yards rushing. And so the years where he's been hurt, to your point, he's still getting over 600 yards. So he's not getting so worried. It felt like Jordan Love, he got hurt in week 1, and that affected him for the whole freaking season.
It did.
I mean, this is the NFL. Brett Favre got hurt, and it didn't affect him the next week. So that's one point. Point number 2, Vagabond John in the Dominican Republic, currently sitting in the Caribbean, looking out at the ocean. This could not be a better week for him, right? He's sitting here, first of all, got a house accepted in Minneapolis
Congrats.
area. I appreciate that. Turns out we did a little research afterwards. It's the same neighborhood that Justin Jefferson, Kirk Cousins, and Dalvin Cook lived in, which was kind of cool. I'm like, I don't know as a Packer fan if I feel good or bad about this, but there might be potential for undercover ops in the future based on the neighborhood we landed in. And then third of all, a year and a half ago, Grant, on these same radio stations, we sat here and we talked about how dead the Vic Fangio defense was. We talked about how you can't sit back in the cover 2. And I don't know if you had the radio on or the broadcast on, but for Tom Brady to sit there and validate what I've been pounding the table for damn near 3 years on these same stations, when it comes to when you're looking to stop elite quarterbacks, Vic Fangio might be the best in the NFL at that. And the Packers, they had a coordinator who was Carrington Valentine, Corey Ballantyne, and Rudy frickin' Ford, who I believe is unemployed right now. Maybe all 3 of them are unemployed next season.
Fair.
Stopped Patrick frickin' Mahomes, held him to 19 points, and the Packers got a win. And Packer fans sat here and said, that's not my defensive coordinator. We need something else. When, fast forward to 2024, 2025, now we're all of a sudden having the conversation, maybe we don't have the talent we thought in the defensive line. Last night proved 2 things to me. 1, the Vic Fangio defense is absolutely not dead. For Christ's sake, it just won a damn Super Bowl. And 2, you need to have real NFL players on the defensive line to give your coordinator a freaking shot. So if we're talking about talent versus coordinators, the Packers flushed their coordinator down the drain, who dominated Mike McCarthy and the number 1 offense in the Cowboys in their home stadium, dominated Patrick Mahomes, held the 49ers to 6 freaking points in a playoff game. The Fangio defense has never been more alive, and the Packers flushed their coordinator, who ran the same system, down the drain. This Packers team on defense doesn't have the talent you thought it did.
All right.
And I'll rest my case.
All right. Well, that's a good case. Enjoy your vacation. Okay. So I want to talk about all that next, because the same exact talking points went through my head last night about how Vic Fangio is running the defense that the Packers didn't want to run anymore. But in that same call, Vagabond John, I just got to point out at the end, you're like, the Vic Fangio scheme is the best. And then in the same point, you're talking about how, well, the scheme doesn't really matter. It's all about the talent. I don't think last night was about Vic Fangio's defense. By the way, wasn't Vic Fangio like 0-8 or 0-9 previously against Patrick Mahomes? I don't know what he is against other elite quarterbacks. He's been a good DC for a long time. I don't think last night was about the majesty of Vic Fangio's scheme. I was watching on TV, but by God, by the third quarter, who was even paying attention? The game was over. So I don't know what the announcer said. But last night to me was they have 4 defensive linemen who can win play after play. They didn't blitz once. So run any coverage behind that you want, whether it's cover 2, mix in some man, quarters, cover 3. I don't care. If you have that defensive front that can just jailbreak the quarterback play after play, I don't think the coverage matters. Man, zone, whatever. I still think it's about getting home with 4, which Hafley or Barry, doesn't matter. That's what the Packers wanted to do. And we could talk about why the talent is coming up short. Let's talk about that next. I think that's a great point. I want to connect this Super Bowl to the Packers as many possible ways as we can, because at the end, that's what this show is all about. We talk about Wisconsin sports. So I'll get to some of your texts. I'll continue to take your calls, 608-321-1670. But I want to start, at least when we come back, with Vic Fangio and the Eagles defensive line, which I think was the star of the show.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
In 5 minutes. Let's go. Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. Let's go. Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
High level, Vic Fangio's defense, man. What they were able to do, Next Gen Stats has the stat out there right now. Remember, they're tracking everything live as we go. 0 blitzes from Philadelphia, literally 4-man rushes the entire game.
Do you envision this defense going, and where did you have to adjust to get it to where it did get to?
Well, I envisioned, rushing 4 and playing 3D 4 under a heck of a lot more, and we ended up doing a lot of simulated blitzes and different pressures and playing a bunch of cover 2. So
2 comments. That first from Steve Palazzolo, who's now with the 33rd team. Podcast with Sam Monson still. That was from last night or this morning. And then I took that comment and I sandwiched it with Matt LaFleur's comment from his end of the season presser. It's like, hey, Matt, what did you want your defense to be this year? What was the ideal? And he's like, well, we wanted to be able to rush 4, and we couldn't do it. The team that beat the Packers, advanced 2 more rounds, and eventually won the Super Bowl, smoked Patrick Mahomes for 4 straight quarters, never blitzed 1 time. So I just think if there's an area, if there's a part of the roster or a part of the game where we can say, well, that's where the Packers need to catch up, well, we can start there. We could probably end there, too. If you can rush 4 and get that much pressure on a quarterback from start to finish, well, that makes everything else easy. And Vagabond John called in, not surprised, a little tuned up. He went a little long. It's fine. We haven't taken calls in a while. No one else was on hold. Saying, I thought Vic Fangio's defense was dead. I thought his style of defense was dead. Well, I don't know if that was as much about Vic Fangio's style of defense as it was the personnel in the trenches. And if you want to make the case that Joe Barry never had the personnel to be great, okay, fine. That's fine. They played pretty darn well in the playoffs against the Niners last year, although they didn't get a stop at the end when it counted. And they played well against Mahomes. And, the year before that, he was referencing that game against the Cowboys and McCarthy. It's the first time in forever I've heard anyone reference that game. So I don't know why we're dragging that game up, Vagabond John. But fine. It's an example. You can use it. Jeff Hafley's defense was also great this year, I think, with the talent they had. If anything, if we want to draw big conclusions about the Packers defense over the last 5 years, it's that they probably had a coordinator who was good enough to succeed, and I think their coordinator was good enough and did succeed. Did they have the elite talent, pass rush talent especially, to maybe be among the best defenses in football? Probably not. And unless Brian Gutekunst can change that and fix that and add talent or continue to grow the talent that's already there, the coordinator is probably going to be secondary. And maybe that's the drum that Vagabond John's been banging obnoxiously all along. Whatever. Some texts, 608-321-1670. This is a 715 number. I don't think I have your name, so I apologize. Grant, I think our first-round picks are a commodity to be traded for a known commodity, like defensive linemen, maybe Micah Parsons or Myles Garrett. We miss more often than we hit with our first-round picks. Is that big of a deal to give up those 2 number 1s the next 2 years, especially when they're really almost 2s for how we draft? This text continues. I know the Packers don't operate that way, but the definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. No, it's not a bad point. The Eagles have traded first-round picks. They traded high-level picks to get A.J. Brown, right? I guarantee that Howie Roseman's going to be on the phone at some point this offseason, at least asking about Myles Garrett, right? He's always continuing to look to be aggressive. And this is why, we had Aaron Nagler on the show last week. And others, and Nagler and lots of others Packer people have talked about, well, they're on kind of this 3-year trajectory, this 3-year plan. And when I was driving in this morning, I was spinning the dial. I was listening to Ebo, and I caught a little bit of Brian Butch on Zabe's show, too, on the other station, who was like, well, are the Eagles on a 3-year plan? Or are they just going into every offseason with the intention of acquiring as much talent as possible with the ultimate goal of winning and competing for a Super Bowl every year? You know what I mean? And it's not like you say, well, the Eagles have that luxury. They're not paying their quarterback. Yeah, they are. Yeah, they are. They've actually been paying their quarterback longer than the Packers have been paying theirs. Well, the Eagles have had all their picks. Yeah, but they've traded away picks too. It's not like the Eagles, they've had some advantages. They've had down years that's given them a good pick, or they've made trades that has, netted them additional picks. But so have the Packers, right? We talked about this, I think, 2 weeks ago. They traded away Aaron Rodgers. They traded away Devontae Adams. They had extra picks once upon a time too, and it didn't amount to a windfall of extra talent like we've seen in Philadelphia, right? So I again, to build off this caller's point about potentially trading away some capital, be a little bit more aggressive. I know everyone's focused on that. Well, Goody's got a 3-year plan. Okay, are the Eagles on a 3-year plan? Are they just saying, hey, we have opportunities to get better this offseason. Let's take advantage. And then next offseason, we'll do the same thing. And the next offseason, we'll do the same thing. It's not like the Eagles pivot. They rotate guys out. They go from Hassan Reddick to Bryce Huff. And then Josh Sweat, who's now going to be a free agent. Zach Bond, they're probably going to leave. Watch them bring in others, right? It's not necessarily a 3 or a 4-year plan. It's how can we be the best possible team for this upcoming season? And we'll try to win a Super Bowl, which I hope to see a little bit more of that approach from Brian Gutekunst this offseason, especially considering in his end-of-the-year presser, he said it's time to compete for championships. Ryan in Manitowoc says, Eagles have the second Super Bowl in 4 years, and to me, 3 years, technically. 4 years. And to me, it still feels like the Packers feel like they are trying to figure things out after LaFleur's been here for 5 or 6 years. What do you think when do you think the Packers sit down and look at everything? Coaching, players, scout team, etc., to see what needs to maybe change to progress like the Eagles and Chiefs? Or are they maybe closer to Super Bowl appearances than most people think? Ryan from Manitowoc. I saw a lot of Packers people on Twitter watch that game yesterday and say, well, the Packers played the Eagles a lot tougher than this. They're closer than we think. They're closer than everyone thinks. That's fair. That's not how I saw it. I looked at the Eagles roster and said, okay, the Eagles are better at corner. They're just as good at linebacker. They're way better along the defensive line. They're better on the O-line. They're better at running back. They're better at wide receiver. They're close to as good as tight end, Dallas Goedert, Tucker Kraft, whatever, throw that out. And, Cohen mentioned it in his call. Are the Packers better at quarterback? It's hard to say yes. If you're saying that Jordan Love is better than Jalen Hurts, you're not really saying that based in fact. You're just saying that over time, you think Jordan Love is going to be better and more productive. Jalen Hurts has already been to 2 Super Bowls. He probably could have or should have won the first. We're not that far away. The universe in which we live is not that far away. Another bounce of the ball or two, and we're waking up this morning in a world where Jalen Hurts has won 2 Super Bowls in 3 years, and the Packers haven't been to one in 15 now. All the way back in 2011, 14, 15, however you want to count your years, right? So I think everything is down to be looked at. I did not watch that game yesterday thinking, well, the Packers were right there with the Eagles. They're closer than everyone thinks. No, I look at the Eagles and I'm like, well, Jalen Carter's way better than Kenny Clark. Whoever their edge rushers are way better than Lucas Van Ness. Their corners are awesome. The Packers are basically at ground zero at corner. Their linebackers and safety. That roster is stacked. I like how the Packers build their O-line. The Eagles have a better line. And I like Josh Jacobs. Saquon is better. I like the Packers' young wide receivers. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are much better. And just looking at the last 2 or 3 years, I don't know how you build a case based in fact and statistics and performance that tells you that Jalen Hurts isn't better than Jordan Love too. LaCroix Butler. I like this. LaCroix's 6-pack from Super Bowl. 1, Nick Sirianni is now a top 5 coach. Number 2, the halftime show was woke garbage. Yeah, we can talk about the halftime show. 3, Patrick Mahomes can still be the GOAT. 4, Eagles roster best we've seen since 2000 Ravens. 5, Packers aren't close. 6, Vagabond John needs to be on a time limit next time. He's on vacation. There was no one else on hold. He was cooking. I wasn't going to cut him off. Thank you for the text, LaCroix. Nice to hear from you. Maybe we can talk about number 3 in your 6-pack when we come back. Patrick Mahomes can still be the GOAT, he says. I think this is an interesting point of conversation. Saw a lot of Boston people. I think Bill Simmons included. I didn't listen to the pod, but I saw the tweet, which isn't that 2025. Well, I didn't read the story. I just saw the headline. Saw a lot of Boston people like, don't ever put Patrick Mahomes' name in a conversation with Tom Brady ever again. This GOAT conversation is done. It's like, well, yesterday's game matters. Goes on Mahomes' ledger, but I think to say after last night that it's done, I think that's a little silly. And I agree with you, LaCroix. That's good number 3 from your 6-pack. We can discuss that more next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. Wisco Sports Show will resume in The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
I think these markets like Green Bay and Buffalo, it's let's be honest, the media is not as loud, it's more supportive. I mean, in Philadelphia, Sean McDermott is out of a job. It's done. He's already been canned. If he could not beat a team where you felt like you had at least as talented a quarterback, McDermott would be gone in Philadelphia. And so I think, sometimes those markets, they're too nice, Buffalo and Green Bay. To me, both those teams need Myles Garrett. You're not going anywhere. I mean, it's like, I like LaFleur. I like McDermott. These Buffalo's not winning that game. They get outcoached and outplayed. Just go buy him. So go trade for him. I'd love to see it.
That point from Colin Cowherd on his reaction podcast he did with John Middlecoff. I listened to it this morning, and I bookmarked a couple quotes. I have one more that I'll play a little bit later on in the show. The point of, these East Coast big market teams, more aggressive, right? Every offseason, who can we get? How can we get better? Do we need to fire someone? Maybe cities like Green Bay or Buffalo, a little bit more easygoing, and that builds with Ryan in Manitowoc, his text from the last segment that we were talking about a little bit. The Packers, they got this 3-year plan. Okay. Did the Eagles have a 3-year plan? Or are they just trying to acquire as much talent and be the best team they can on a year-by-year basis. Because that's kind of what it seems like to me, kind of what it seems like from the Rams and some of these other teams. They're a notch above what the Packers have been the last few years. Before we went to that last break, LaCroix gave us his six-pack from the Super Bowl yesterday, and one of his points was Patrick Mahomes can still be the GOAT, right? Now, in Mahomes' 2 Super Bowl losses, he has been blown out. I also think in both of his Super Bowl losses, his team was significantly less talented. And by the way, I picked the Eagles in this game. This is what I said on Friday. This is from Bill's show.
I can go next. I think Philly's going to win. And I don't want
Philly's got a better roster.
Philly's got the significantly better roster, which is why it's really difficult for me to pick the Chiefs. I want the Chiefs to win. I hope they win. I don't like Philly. I would rather see Kansas City win 3 in a row. This to me feels like Tampa Bay, Kansas City in 2021. I think we're going to watch this for a couple of minutes and be like, Philly's D-line is nasty. I think they're going to throw everything out of whack. I just think that Philly's roster is that much better. So Mahomes is going to have to be unbelievable, and then Philly's going to have to make a bunch of mistakes, I think, for that talent disparity to matter. So I'll take Philly, even though I don't like it.
So I'm surprised. I was looking up the line where it closed. I assume I'm just looking at ESPN. So this number's from ESPN Bet. Maybe you saw it at a different book or at a different number. I'm assuming this is the closing line. Kansas City -1.5. I thought they'd be dogs in this game. I feel like they should have been dogs in this game, but that's the power of coach quarterback. It's always coach quarterback, coach, right? And Kansas City is about as good as you could possibly be at those two spots. And that carries a lot of weight with bettors. And, you know, when people are picking games, how many times over last week did you hear, well, the Eagles are better, but how do you pick against Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid? Okay. So you could see why we arrive at a world in which Kansas City, much less talented, much less physically gifted, more athletic all over the roster, closes apparently at ESPN Bet. Maybe it's different at other books, but -1.5 at kickoff, right? That's where the line closed. They were favored. I think Patrick Mahomes could still be the GOAT. All these Philly people, or all these Boston people, excuse me, on the internet last night, and I saw Bill Simmons talking about this too, is like, this ends the debate. How can you ever put Patrick Mahomes in a conversation with Tom Brady ever again? People are so nuts. Nobody remembers, or nobody pretends to remember. I don't know. Tom Brady went 10 years in between Super Bowl appearances. He went a decade between winning a Super Bowl. I shouldn't say a Super Bowl appearance. I should say winning a Super Bowl. He went 10 years between Super Bowl wins. And we're going to act like Patrick Mahomes is disqualified from any big picture legacy conversations moving forward because he failed to win his third in 4 trips, right? He's been there 4 straight years. Am I remembering? I think I'm remembering that correctly. Or 4 in 5 years or whatever, some ridiculous number. I just think it's so wild to me, you know? Well, you never put him with Brady. So before the game, he was right there with Brady, but because he lost, he's completely now off the map. He's fallen off the table. That doesn't make sense. Now, then again, fan is short for fanatic, and, you know, sports talk isn't always logical. I know, because I'm very, very often not logical. I just think it's so silly that everyone's dismissing Mahomes' legacy. Now, it's a real thing. Like, Brady didn't get blown out in Super Bowls, you know, and Mahomes has now been blown out in 2. I don't know that means a whole lot to me, honestly. Well, when you lost, how did you lose? Did you lose with style point? I don't know. That only does so much for me. I understand. Look, I understand. Like, Brady didn't get blown out. Mahomes has now been blown out twice. He's also won 3, and he's on track. And also, he hasn't gone 10 years in between winning a Super Bowl. That's something that Brady did, and no one ever brings it up. No one ever talks about it. No one ever mentions it, you know, which I guess is expected. The further removed we get from certain events or certain individuals doing things, we remember the good, and we tend to, you know, discard the bad or discard the less amazing parts of it. I get it. It's just a little silly and acting a little dumb. Mahomes is still right there, although yesterday certainly doesn't help. 3-peat would have been huge. Packers, last team to 3-peat. All I'm saying, we could talk about that in hour number 2 as well. Monday mailbag at 5:50, grantbills21@gmail.com. Submit your questions. We'll get an update from Zach. 2 minutes, no commercials.
This is a Wisconsin Sports Zone update
Well, it's game day for the Bucks as they play the second game of a back-to-back. Yesterday was a win over Philly. Tonight, Golden State comes to town with a new addition in Jimmy Butler. Milwaukee has its own new additions, including forward Kyle Kuzma in 2 games for the club, averaging 12.5 points, 7.5 rebounds, and 3 assists. Guard Damian Lillard was asked about the impact of Kuzma so far.
He's been very impactful. You know, he's a guy who, watching from a distance, I always felt like, you know, he can hoop. You know, he's a good player. And then you get him on your team and get a closer look, and you can hear how he interacts throughout a game, and you see how well he understands the game, how he knows how to position himself to help the team in whatever we're trying to do.
Milwaukee playing without Giannis Antetokounmpo as he deals with a calf strain that's going to keep him out of action through the All-Star break. Means he will not play in the All-Star game. The first time he's missed that. Again, it'll be the Bucks and Warriors tonight. Tip is at 7. Meanwhile, Wisconsin basketball team get a little break this week as they don't play again until Saturday when they travel to Purdue. The Boilermakers lead the Big Ten at 11-2. Badgers are 2 games back and in a tie for 4th place in the conference with 7 games to play.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
If you're interested in a rewarding career with a strong Wisconsin company, Rural Mutual Insurance is looking to add to their growing team of successful employees and agents. Apply online today at ruralmutual.com/careers.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Well, linebacker Zach Baun became the 24th former Badger to win a Super Bowl last night with Philly beating Kansas City, a finalist for Defensive Player of the Year. Baun had an interception in the game, just the second former Wisconsin player to have one. He's going to become a free agent next month. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heil.
I can go next. I think Philly's going to win. And I don't want
Philly's got the better roster.
Philly's got the significantly better roster, which is why it's really difficult for me to pick the Chiefs. I want the Chiefs to win. I hope they win. I don't like Philly. I would rather see Kansas City win 3 in a row. This to me feels like Tampa Bay, Kansas City in 2021. I think we're going to watch this for a couple of minutes and be like, Philly's D-line is nasty. I think they're going to throw everything out of whack. I just think that Philly's roster is that much better. So Mahomes is going to have to be unbelievable, and then Philly's going to have to make a bunch of mistakes, I think, for that talent disparity to matter. So I'll take Philly, even though I don't like it.
The bench is empty. The teams converge, and this one is over. And the Eagles have beaten the Chiefs convincingly in Super Bowl 59, 40-22.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
I love Zach. Zach does great work. Excellent updated as always. So this is not a nitpick of the work that Zach does. This is not me nitpicking his update. I just got to come out and say something. I saw Tyler in Massachusetts tweeting about this yesterday. I don't care that Zach Baun went to Wisconsin. It does nothing for me. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And I know, when the Packers have been eliminated, we look for reasons to follow. Well, Zach Baun's in the Super Bowl. He's from Brown Deer. I don't care at all. I'm not anti-Zach Baun. It's not that I'm not happy for him, but I feel no connection. He does not play for Wisconsin anymore. He is from here. Lots of people are from Wisconsin. It moves the needle a negative amount for me. You don't have to feel the same way. It's just one of these things. I don't know why it sticks up my butt, but it does. I don't care at all. Does nothing for me. So I don't know why I felt the need to mention that. Maybe the update got me stirred up. A funny Zach Baun story. I have a very, very close buddy, probably still one of my 2 or 3 best friends to this day. I don't get to see him very often anymore, although I am seeing him in a couple weeks. I'm excited. He lives up towards Manitowoc now, so I'm gonna spend a night and go visit him. Whatever, you don't care. It was him and a couple of friends who were out on State Street back in the, I don't know, when we were in college, whatever. I don't know what year this was, but it was a while ago now. And he was out on State Street, and I got a text from him. It said, hey, it's something, I obviously don't remember the text verbatim, but I'll fill in the cracks for the entertainment value of the story, okay? He texted me something like, hey, man, at a bar, I probably knew he was in Madison. He's like, at a bar down here, and Chris Orr is here. I said, Yeah, that's pretty cool. I didn't go to UW-Madison, so I don't know if you're a student at UW, you go out on the town. I assume you see athletes. I can't imagine it's that rare, but still kind of cool. Like, yeah, man, that's cool. He's like, I'm gonna ask him for a picture. Okay, cool. So he goes. It wasn't Zach, but it was Chris Orr. He had him confused, and he was drunk. He's like, yeah, I got a picture with Chris Orr, and he sent me the picture, and it was Zach Bond. I'm like, wait, did you go up to him? And were you like, hey, Chris, big Badger fan, can I get your picture? And he was just like, whatever, dude, I don't get, just take a picture, sure. Like, he wasn't going to correct you. They were just drunk. And they saw a big dude, and they're like, yeah, he's a linebacker. Yeah, that's Chris Orr. And the funny thing is, whenever this was, 2017, 18, I don't remember when he played here. He's not here anymore. I don't retain these things. And what's funny is everyone would have had a smartphone. You could have just Googled it. I did it a bunch last week where I'm like, is that person? Google it real quick before you want to be sure before you go up and talk to him. He's like, yeah, man. We met Chris Orr at the bar. Check out this picture. I'm like, that's not Chris Orr. That is Zach Bond. And certainly liquor, played a role, but it's not really like they don't look that similar. They don't share a striking resemblance. That's all I'm saying. We can get back to talking about the Super Bowl, and I'm happy to be back in studio after a week in New Orleans at Radio Row. So happy to get back to taking your calls. It's the best part of Sports Talk Radio. 608-321-1670. The Eagles winning yesterday. A very deserving champion. What a roster, top to bottom, side to side on both sides of the ball. Just an outstanding, talented, hard-hitting, violent team. And the thing that strikes me most about this game is that the Eagles were up 35 points on Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid with a coach and a quarterback who most people still really don't believe are that elite. I think people now are giving Nick Sirianni credit, like I did when Cone called in earlier, because they're like, well, shoot, you got to give him credit. How could you not? Begrudgingly giving credit. And with Hurts, I think Hurts is very good. I don't think he's Josh Allen or Lamar, although he's a better playoff performer than Lamar. He's not Patrick Mahomes, although he's beaten Patrick Mahomes. You know what I mean? I still don't think he's in that elite group. He's good, but he's not in that elite group. And for a team to be up 35 on Patrick Mahomes with a so-so coach and a quarterback that's just pretty good, doesn't that speak to the talent? Oh, my God. It's mind-blowing. Really good roster construction from Howie Roseman, who I at times have nitpicked. So I got to wear that. I thought the Jahan Dotson trade was stupid. I kind of still think it's stupid. I guess he caught a touchdown yesterday, but I don't think that's Jahan Dotson. They probably could have done that with Olamide Zaccheaus or whoever the heck. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Southside Scott.
Hey, Southside Scott. What's going on?
Not a whole lot. Hey.
Oh, good.
Are you surprised on how limited Barkley was in the game? I was hoping he would have another, 150, 200 yards or so, but he seemed so limited.
Well,
in the game.
That's another thing, Southside Scott, is I keep going back to this, so sorry to belabor this point. They were up 35 on Patrick Mahomes, and Saquon Barkley wasn't even doing anything. You know what I mean? It's not like their superstars had super duper duper superstar performances. It was contributions from everyone. It was so well rounded. No, because I figured the Chiefs' game plan was we got to snuff out Barkley and we'll try to deal everywhere else. And if their offense would have been able to string drives together, that game plan might have worked. But when you can't get a first down until the third quarter, I don't know that the game plan defensively matters at all, because I think you're just dead.
Right. I don't know. I thought Barkley would have played a bigger role in it. I think Kansas City anticipated Barkley. And I think that's the reason why everybody was more of a participant versus just Barkley stealing the show.
Yeah, and it's not and Southside Scott, I'm looking at the box score. It's a good call and a good point. Something I brought up. It's not like they didn't give him the ball. He had 25 carries, and they they threw him the ball a good amount. He had 6 receptions on 7 targets. I saw Nick Costos, who's one of my favorite betting people. I don't really consume a lot of betting content, but I always watch Costos clips on Twitter because he's funny. And he was an OG WSSP guest back in the day, so I ride or die for those people. But he was on the under for a reception and a half for Saquon Barkley. I saw him banging that drum, and I'm not calling him out, but there were smart people who were like, yeah, probably won't throw it to Saquon much. They handed it to him a bunch and threw it to him a bunch, and he really didn't do much of anything. And the Eagles still won by 20 and led by 35 at one point in time. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
It's Darnell.
Hey, Darnell, what's going on?
Hey, first off, just a great game, a palate cleanser, as it were.
Yeah,
it was kind of nice to see, like, Patrick Mahomes finally take one on the jaw a little bit, he's a great quarterback, and he's in that, just upper echelon, top 2, top 3 quarterbacks of all time already, and he's 30. So it's nice to see him come back a little bit down to earth again.
So you're one of those people that got a lot of joy out of watching him get his ass kicked last night. Even though the game wasn't great and most people didn't love the halftime show, maybe we can talk about that. You found your silver lining in watching Patrick Mahomes take it on the chin.
A little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. I again, if there was a way for both teams to lose, that's what I would have liked. I just hate both fan bases, but yeah, it was nice to see Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce have to hang their head in defeat and not do their like little cocky like charade that they do every single time. He came in to the Super Bowl wearing Philly green or Philly blue. I think that was a big conversation last night. Is it Philly green or Philly blue? But yeah, he showed up wearing Philly green, and then he got his ass beat. So that made me feel good. It's like a bully that finally gets what's coming to him. So,
okay, all right, that's human nature. I get that. No, that's a good take, Darnell. That's just something I can't agree with you. I can't speak to that because I don't care. The Chiefs don't bother me. You know what I mean? Like, they just don't bother me. And I would love to see the Bills in a Super Bowl, but how many cracks do you need at Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs before you're going to win one of these? You know what I mean? That's not a Chiefs problem. It's a Bills problem. It's a Ravens problem to me. Now the Super Bowls the last couple of years. Now, maybe if you want to see some other teams win, I could get your frustration because the Niners easily could have won last year. Niners easily could have won the first time had Jimmy Garoppolo just been able to hit Emmanuel Sanders. The Eagles could have beat him a couple of years ago. So it's not like the Chiefs have blasted all of these teams in the Super Bowls that they've won. In fact, I think they've trailed by some margin in most of them. I don't know that to be true of all of them, but it seems like just a couple, just anecdotally, I feel like I can remember that in all of them. Was certainly the case last night. They just never got going, right? They never got it going. They never mounted a comeback. When they fell behind 10-0, we're all like, oh, that's not a huge deal. We've seen Patrick Mahomes and company come back from that. It was how it looked. It looked like the Tampa game a couple of years ago. It's like, they can't block. They can't get open. You're dead. You're dead in the water. It's like being on a boat that has no power to the engine and no steering. It's like you can't do anything. You can't block. You can't get open. You're cooked. You're done. That's why they had they had more penalty yardage in the first half than actual yardage, didn't they? I mean, I didn't save all of these little statistics and tidbits because you watched. They got dominated. So I could throw you all these numbers at you. You have eyes connected to your brain. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, it's Mark the Virgin.
Hey, Mark, what's up?
Hey, I usually call Ebo's show. I thought I'd give you a holler for first-time caller.
I love it. Thank you.
And the reason I'm calling is to respond to your opening comment that you don't care that Zach Vaughn went to Wisconsin. I do care.
It just doesn't do anything.
Here's the reason I care.
You claim him, though. Is that what you're saying? Like, you still feel connected.
No.
You feel claim.
No, I didn't want the Chiefs or the Eagles to win.
Okay.
So I wanted a natural disaster occur, which would cancel the game. But here's the reason I care, because we can add him to the long list of Badgers excellent Badgers that we were unable to keep in state on the Green Bay Packers. I don't think I have to go through the list.
So this is this
TJ Edwards.
I will do this with you. If you want to use Zach Vaughn to drag Fickle or to drag the Packers in, yes, let's do that 100%, Mark.
Yeah, and here's the problem. Now Green Bay may overcorrect and start drafting Badgers. Short of Hunter Wohler, I mean, there's nobody left.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
It's not like it used to be. But and here's my theory: the Green Bay Packers, they didn't want to seem like homers. There was too much risk. They bring a guy from Wisconsin, he doesn't work out, they get dragged. But I mean, look at the result. I mean, I didn't even mention TJ Watt because no need, but you look at these guys that are performing, Andrew Van Ginkel, TJ, I mean, these guys are starting. TJ Edwards, isn't Nick Herbig somewhere in there?
Yeah. Nick Herbig's been great. I mean, and who's the other one in Pittsburgh? Their second round pick, the defensive lineman who was awesome. Why am I spacing on the name?
Yeah, they're doubling up on Badgers. They're going back to the well.
What's his name? But yeah, there's great Badgers everywhere. So that this can be a twofer, right? We can use this to drag the Packers because they let them get out of the state. And then we can also use these guys to drag Fickell and the current regime in Madison because they're not cranking out athletes. I mean, they're not even sniffing this. Hunter Wohler is probably the closest thing we have right now. Keanu Benton is the name I was thinking of.
He's the last in the long line of great Badger defensive players. And, Jim Leonard, he could have, been feeding them people and then take that job. It could have been totally different.
You mean had he taken the Packers job?
Yeah. I mean, that's a big swing. And it could have gone very, very badly. But I don't know, good coaches, good players are hard to find, and you got to take a chance and use whatever intel you can.
Yeah. And
it's just, yeah. So that's what frustrates me, especially when I see them playing in these big games or doing well on my fantasy team. I'm like, if we could have picked these guys up in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round, I mean, that's a win.
No, I know what you mean, Mark. And that's a great call. And look, I just get annoyed with all of the people pom-pom waving on Twitter. It's like Zach Bond, white deer, or brown deer, whatever. Brown deer, Wisconsin. Yeah, I'm just like, I don't care. He's not here anymore. He plays for the Eagles. Happy for him. Doesn't do anything for me. But if we can weaponize the success of Zach Bond against the Packers or against the current Badgers regime, yes, that I will do. Because the Badgers aren't cranking guys like this out nearly like they used to. And the Packers have let how many of these guys get away? You know what I mean? And even with Cooper DeJean, it's like, well, there's a stud from Iowa. Who have the Packers taken in the last couple of years? Oh, Lucas Van Ness, and then before that, Josh Jackson, who is a complete and total Alex Hornibrook merchant. Just like, man, feels like we're always chasing. And by the way, I will bring up the Cooper DeJean thing today. I understand that Jordan Morgan was hurt all of this last year. I understand, but still, to watch that in the biggest game, it's like, okay, well, that's the guy that everyone wanted, and he's returning an interception for a touchdown in the Super Bowl. Great. Of course. More of your calls and thoughts on this next. I have some more audio that I want to work through as well. Different people saying different things, reacting to this game and reacting to the season. Big picture. We'll continue next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
It's a 3rd and 16 for the Chiefs, and a shotgun snap from their own 24. Rolling out of the pocket, Mahomes lines up. It's intercepted at the 40 and picked off by DeJean, who comes to the near side, the 30. Got it back at the 20, breaks the tackle, the 10, the 5, to the pylon. Touchdown! Eagles have got a pick six. It's Cooper DeJean. A 37-yard pick six of Patrick Mahomes. And the Eagles are just decimating Kansas City in this first half.
Cooper DeJean, would you have liked him to be a Packer? I certainly would have liked that idea. And I didn't hate the Jordan Morgan pick at the time. But this is a results-oriented business. This is the NFL. Right? The results have to matter. How it played out on the field this year has to matter. And I know some people would push back on that and say, Jordan Morgan has only been in the league. Cooper DeJean, they've only been in the league for 1 year. Right? You got to let them develop. You got to let them... Yeah. The draft is for the future. But you know what? And I don't know why I'm the only one who ever says this, that I hear at least. Like, players who are selected and are good right away typically stay good. They don't get bad. It's not like Jared Verse is awesome, right? Defensive Rookie of the Year. Does anyone think that he's just going to forget how to play football in 2 years? Well, you know, he was great right away, but that was never a long-term pick. That was a pick for the here and now. Okay. It can be both, though. Sometimes players are good right away, and then they stay good. Sometimes, here, sit down if you're standing up before I tell you this. Sometimes players come into the league, and they're good, and then they get even better. Can you believe that? And so many people talk about the draft, and they grade Packers draft picks, and they grade the Packers process. Like, well, guys, the draft is not to address a need. The draft is not for the here and now. The draft is for the future. Oh, okay. Good to know. Well, anyways, the Eagles just won another Super Bowl. Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, rookies starting in the secondary. Pretty good. Better than what the Packers were rolling out there this year, at least. That's for sure. Better than some combination of Eric Stokes and Keyshawn Nixon, now people on Twitter are telling me, well, why would they have drafted Cooper DeJean? They had Keyshawn Nixon. You know what? If Keyshawn Nixon would have picked off that ball yesterday, if he was playing slot corner, which by the end of the year, he wasn't, because of course Jair couldn't stay healthy and Eric Stokes wasn't any good, so they had him playing outside, so they could have used the slot corner anyways, whatever. But if Keyshawn Nixon had been playing slot corner in that game yesterday and had caught that ball, you know what he would have done? He would have found some offensive tackle who has 60 pounds on him, and he would have lowered his head and ran right into him and fumbled the ball, because that's what he did against the Eagles the last time they played. Well, why would they have? But why? Why? It sound like Jerry Seinfeld. Why would the Packers draft Cooper DeJean? They have Keyshawn Nixon. I don't know. Maybe because Keyshawn Nixon is a fine player. Maybe we could strive to be a bit better. That's all. So I don't know. Don't talk down to me, Packers media. Don't talk down to us fans. Don't tell us that we shouldn't be peeved that Cooper DeJean played at a high level for the Eagles this year. Don't talk down to me and say that the draft is for the future. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're watching. I watched a football game yesterday that decided the champion of the 2024-2025 NFL season. The Eagles won that game, and Cooper DeJean was a big part of that. So as Bill Michaels said earlier today, and I will just quote him in conclusion, Jordan Morgan better be good. And what's obnoxious is, well, you got to build along the O-line. You got to build along the O-line. Yeah, but the Packers O-line was good this year. It was really good this year. Let's say it was an 8 out of 10. So the idea was they take Jordan Morgan and then they're a 9 out of 10. Would that have made the difference against the Eagles? I claim that it wouldn't. I think you reach a point of diminishing returns with the offensive line. I think once you get a very good O-line, I think it's inefficient use of capital to try to get that very good O-line to a great O-line. I think once you reach a certain level of excellence on the line, you should say that's good enough, because the final 10%, the capital and the resources that we're going to have to spend on that final percent would be much better used elsewhere, which I think we saw with the Packers this year. And also, like, even if Jordan Morgan had played, I need Josh Myers to get it together, and I need Zach Tom to not play his worst game of the year. Were those two things connected to the absence of Jordan Morgan? I don't think so. If Jordan Morgan plays right guard in that game, is Zach Tom all of a sudden not going to play like crap when it matters most? So I guess I don't even know who I'm yelling at, and I guess I don't know what I'm yelling about. But I watched Cooper DeJean, a player that a lot of Packers fans wanted, make an absolutely massive play in the Super Bowl yesterday. And I can't help but think, well, whatever. Would have been a nice Packer. Didn't need him. Backup guard. Backup guard. Backup guard. Not even a tackle, a guard. A guard. Well, maybe one day, Grant, he'll play tackle. Well, maybe one day this Packers team will get back to a Super Bowl. I know we're always on a three-year plan. We're holding steady to our 3 or 4 year plan. Does Howie Roseman have a 3-year plan? I think his 3-year plan is, let's see if we can't win 3 Super Bowls in the next 3 years. Yeah. Luke on the dirt roads says, hey, Grant, texts in. There's still time for this pick to get worse. That's not where I thought. That's not where I thought that was going. When I started reading, I thought you were going to say, there's still time. No, he's the opposite. Luke on the dirt roads says, hey, Grant, there's still time for this pick to get worse. Good thing we got Kevin King and Vince Beagle rather than future Hall of Famer TJ Watt. Though I bet Green Bay would have messed that up somehow. Yeah, I don't know. The TJ Watt takes are very entertaining, at least. I love the people who are like, well, if they had drafted TJ Watt, they probably never sign Preston or Zadarius Smith, and they probably never draft Rashawn Gary. And I hear that. I'm like, great, awesome. Then we never would have had to spend that money. And we never would have had to draft Rashawn Gary. We could have drafted some other developmental outside linebacker from the Big Ten, and not the one that works out. One of the other ones, a Lucas Van Ness type, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a Big Ten edge rusher who's panned out and been excellent. You'd say Chase Young, but he really hasn't been. But not one of the good ones. One of the Lucas Van Ness ones. You just wait. When Lucas Van Ness figures it out, his pass rushes. Pass is going to be great. By the way, a great text, Luke on the dirt roads, made me laugh. Send your questions, sports related or not. Maybe a great time to do some questions and answers about the Super Bowl and New Orleans or whatever else is on your mind currently. Email them to grantbills21@gmail.com. And if you're watching on the live stream, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, you can see on the graphic, I will read and answer your questions at 5:50 in about a half hour. We'll get to that. Listening to this play call, I won't go so far as to say it triggers me, but I don't like it.
It's a 3rd and 16 for the Chiefs, and a shotgun snap from their own 24, rolling out of the pocket. Mahomes lines up. It's intercepted at the 40, and picked off by DeJean, who comes to the near side, the 30. Got it back at the 20, breaks the tackle, the 10, the 5, to the pylon. Touchdown! Eagles have got a pick 6. It's Cooper DeJean, a 37-yard pick 6 of Patrick Mahomes. And the Eagles are just decimating Kansas City in this first half.
Decimating. I think it's a good word. Shout out to Kevin Harlan. Excellent description. I would agree. That's exactly what it was. At that moment in time, when Cooper DeJean took that back, what was the score? Did that put him up 24-0? No. Interception, touchdown. Man, that put him up 17-0. Yikes. Would have been a good Packer. Would have really liked it. But we'll see. Jordan Morgan. The problem that I have with the Jordan Morgan pick, I'm never going to fault the general manager for addressing the lines of scrimmage. Okay. It's just that, like, their O-line was already pretty good. They're pretty good at the O-line thing. They're really good at the O-line thing. I think that O-line was B+ A- at worst. Like, how much better, assuming Jordan Morgan was able to play as a rookie, which he wasn't, how much better was he supposed to make their O-line? You know what I mean? Was he supposed to take them from an 80% perfect O-line to an 86%? Would that have made the difference? I wager no. Like, I'm just screaming into the void here. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back, talk about something else. Take more of your calls, too. 608-321-1670. A couple of minutes. We'll be right back.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
This has been the plan. You're going to let these guys mature, and I would think the idea is there probably one or two of them are really going to blossom in year 3. Now, of course, hope is not a plan, right?
Well, that's the thing. Last year, it could kind of be a plan. I thought this last
Right.
offseason, they could sit and see who pops. I don't think they have that luxury now going into next year.
I think and that's why I think they add in the draft. But I don't see them spending. You're talking about capital, or like that would be a trade for Devontae or some kind of big signing, maybe Godwin or somebody like that. But even then, I just don't see that. I don't think that's part of their program. I think I could see that at corner. I could see that at edge. But at wide receiver, I would be very surprised.
Well, and fans for a long time, myself included, we want a veteran at wide receiver, and then we get Devin Funchess and we hate it. That's Aaron Nagler from Friday's show when we were down in New Orleans. Nice to be back in studio today. Nice to be able to take your calls and have some empty phone lines if you want to grab them. You won't have to wait. 608-321-1670. You can text in as well. This text just says, does Philly's defensive line help rookie defensive backs for Philly? If Evan Williams played for Philly, could he have had the same success? Also, if Green Bay drafts DeJean, they possibly don't get Edge Cooper. That's very true. Right. In all of these conversations about the draft, if you pick someone somewhere, then you can't pick someone somewhere else. I do get it. Let me be mad about Cooper DeJean today. Packers fans, we should be able to be mad about that. We should be able to bitch. Right? And if they take Cooper DeJean in the first round instead of Jordan Morgan, I don't see how that changes their ability to maneuver around to get Edger and Cooper later. Who knows? Butterfly effect. Butterfly effect. I talk for a living, I swear to God. It can matter in some of those things. I'll also take your calls. By the way, I'm surprised that we haven't had any commentary other than LaCroix Butler's Super Bowl 6-pack that he gave us earlier, and maybe we can discuss this in the mailbag coming up. But because the game was so bad, I was fine with taking takes on the halftime show as well. This text says, from Johnny and DeForest, Grant, the Super Bowl halftime show was really bad. They've completely gone away from putting a good act up there that can actually play music. Put up a poll. What would you rather listen to? A band that rocks or watch a ridiculous dance for the Super Bowl halftime show? Who are your suggestions? Johnny and DeForest. Well, here's the problem. And I was talking about this with Mike Clemens last week. There are no bands anymore. There are no bands anymore. Unless, and I'm probably not, I'm no Anthony Fantano, that the bald guy. I'm not the world's biggest music nerd here, okay? But the bands that are big are K-pop bands. Mainskin had a run. Are they still, I don't see them getting a ton of run on top 40. And I'm on a top 40 station at night. I'm on Z93. Right now, it's a lot of TikTok, 1 or 2 hit wonders, and just a bunch of female pop stars. Like, that's pop music right now. Sabrina Carpenter, Billie Eilish, Charlie XCX, and I know I'm going to forget someone. Taylor Swift, obviously. Tate McRae, I think to a lesser degree, but still. Not to rip Tate McRae, but she's in that group too. And I think there's someone that I'm forgetting, which is fine. Like, that's pop music right now. There is no band. Now, they could go back a couple of years, but Coldplay's already done it. Maroon 5's already done it. And I don't remember. Maroon 5's done it, right? Am I misremembering? I can think back to when Coldplay did it. I don't think a lot of you were jumping out of your seat at Coldplay a couple of years ago. Right? So when you say, what happened to the bands? Great question. They don't really exist anymore. So would I prefer someone who's up there to sing? Sure. Or play instruments? Obviously. That's more my thing. But I don't know that there are a ton of options for that right now. Kendrick, okay, let's talk about the Kendrick thing, okay? I think most of these halftime shows are fine. Let's start there. Baseline is fine. When people say it was terrible, no, it wasn't. Terrible is he forgets the words or his voice sounds bad, or like terrible is, oh, there are mistakes. There are technical difficulties. Someone falls over. It wasn't terrible. I think Kendrick's halftime show was fine. Okay. Rap concerts are always going to be behind an 8 ball because rap is it's difficult to perform a rap song the same and give off the same thing that you get when you listen to the record. Right? Like I saw 2 Chainz in concert at Summerfest a couple years ago. It was fun, but I'm not like, man, he was a great performer. No, he's up, he's up there just hyping up the crowd and yelling some lines. I love Future. Love Future. I don't know that I would go see a Future concert if it was happening a block from my house. I probably would, but you get my point. Like rap music is just not, it's not how it works. It's not what it's about. So you're already a little bit limited with the rap genre in terms of playing instruments and doing all sorts of things. Now, Kendrick could have brought out guest stars. I see people talking about that. Why didn't Kendrick bring out this? Okay, well, but here's the thing. If an artist brings out guest stars, now can the artist not stand on their own 2 legs? Got to resort to special guests and gimmicks, right? But if an artist doesn't bring anyone out and they don't have any, if they're not showboating, if there's no visual spectacles, well, it's just kind of plain. It didn't do too much. Okay, so there's a no man's land to be found there too. My only issue with the halftime show is that I just would have preferred to hear different songs. It was a lot of new songs off his new albums, which is fine. It's not really what I expected. Like my favorite Kendrick album is Damn. And that's definitely not getting played at the Super Bowl other than DNA, which is the one song on that album I never really need to listen to because it was kind of the single and I remember syrup sandwiches. It's not my thing. Okay. Damn is a great album. There's like little hints of R&B. There's hooks. There's some musicality to it, but it's very mellow. Yeah. That's not moving the needle in an arena. So I knew I wasn't going to hear my favorite Kendrick stuff, but I thought we'd hear like or Money Trees and I sound so not but like I know as much Kendrick as any regular Joe should know. And most of the songs that us regular Joes know, like didn't get played. He did All the Stars, which a pleasant surprise because I think that song is kind of sneaky, underrated because that era, if you want to talk about pop music, that era of pop music was unfriggin' believable. Like end of 2016 into 2017 into 2018, like that is pop music. There were bands. Maroon 5 was at his peak. Ed Sheeran was at his peak. Taylor Swift was putting out good music. So it's not a sex thing. It's not that I just miss men in pop music, right? And even some of the men like Shawn Mendes, not exactly Mr. Masculine, although I'm sure he's comfortable in his masculinity, his sexuality, whatever, right? Like there was pop music. There were artists who would put out an album and then we would listen to it. And then they'd put out another album. And then we'd be like, oh, interesting choices from the first album to the next. And we just don't really have that a lot anymore. So the SZA part was cool. All the Stars that's a banger. That's a good song. But I just think the number one problem with Kendrick's show is that I just would have played different songs. I would have preferred to hear different songs. The rest of it is expected. It's a 12-minute concert on your TV. Like you're only going to get so much from it. And it was rap, which is a challenge. Like performing rap live, especially on TV, especially in a small setting with certain limitations in a huge arena show. I thought Kendrick did about as well as he could have done. It's just, I would have done different songs to appeal to more of the masses. You're not going to appeal to everyone, but I feel like with Kendrick, I'm mostly I'm the average. There's lots of people who know more. There's certainly lots of people who know less. But most of the biggies that I would have expected to hear just didn't get played, which is fine. That's a choice. But then people are going to be at home, be like, I can't understand it. Well, but if it was a song that you'd know what to listen for, and then maybe you'd get a little bit more from it. Whatever. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
What's going on, Grant? It's Badger Bloody.
Hey, Badger Bloody. What's up?
Well, I just wanted to call and just weigh in on this halftime show thing because the amount of people riled up about this I find very amusing. First of all, I do agree with your point that there really are not a lot of very high-profile bands that would fit, like the Super Bowl halftime. Like Springsteen was great, Prince was great. You can't keep running out those guys again. And let's not forget the fact that Kendrick just won, what was it, 5 Grammys?
Yeah.
5 Grammys.
Yeah,
so the guy that basically just cleaned up at the Grammys at the Super Bowl.
As commercially successful and as decorated of a rapper as you will have. Like, and if you don't like rap, that's fine. But he's not a slap. You know, like he's probably the best or close to the best we have in rap right now.
Exactly. And if you ask anyone who is a fan of like current and modern hip hop, Kendrick is probably going to be in most people's top 5, if not top 3.
Yeah.
Second of all, your point about the guest stars. Okay, he had Samuel L. Jackson
It was cool.
making a surprise,
Which I liked because if you know Kendrick, he's got like the voice lead-ins, like that was a role to be played in the performance of his music. I thought it was cool. I liked that.
Yeah, I did too. I was grinning ear to ear on my couch when I saw that. I couldn't believe it. So he had Sam Jackson, he had SZA on stage singing with him. He brought out Serena Williams, who was just there for, she didn't sing or anything. She was there dancing kind of for like aesthetic purposes. And some people may or may not be super familiar with the Kendrick and Drake beef, but a lot of that performance was just, strays at Drake and kind of just making fun of the whole Drake beef, down to the game over that the crowd spelled out when the performance was done. So I do understand the criticism of like, maybe it wasn't for you, but to say that it was a bad halftime show or a failure of a halftime show, like, I'm sorry, you are not the target demographic for everybody.
Yeah.
Like, I have things that are my preference that I like better than other things, but I totally can see that that performance by Kendrick last night maybe was not aimed at me, a white 32-year-old Wisconsinite.
Yeah.
Like, that's just the way it is.
Like, my point is, Badger Bloody, I don't know you specifically, but I know like a good amount of Kendrick's music. I've listened to it as I've grown up. Like, it's not like I'm completely in the dark, like, oh, this rapper. You know what I mean? Like I know his stuff. That's why I think if you would have done a couple more hits, and I got to run because I'm up against it, Badger Bloody, we can talk more about this at a later date. This football season's over. We got nothing else going on. Badger basketball, we'll keep on that. Pitchers and catchers, but I don't know. Play a couple more hits. I think that probably would have helped. And now we're getting texts for suggestions. Jay Krebs says Garth, George, Allen, and Reba would bring the house down. Anything involving Alan Jackson will far from bring the house down. And I love Alan Jackson. Not exactly a stage presence, other than his height. Red Hot Chili Peppers, Pearl Jam. Pearl Jam would be interesting. Yeah. Pearl Jam's not I probably know more Kendrick than I know Pearl Jam. That'd be interesting. I think people always say we want country. I think there's a needle to be threaded, some mix of like, bear with me, Kenny Chesney, Zach Brown Band, and maybe one other. I know there's another piece. Once upon a time, you could have said Jason Aldean, but I think we could find something. We could find something. It's tough though. Like country fans, it's tough right now. Well, Zach Bryan is great. Yeah, Zach Bryan. Yeah, everyone loves Zach Bryan. Okay. By the way, the Drake thing, Kendrick's better. Look, Drake is probably a perv. Okay, I'm not defending Drake. I brought this up with Ebo earlier today. I think it's a little silly that everyone my age has completely thrown Drake to the side after we grew up loving his music, making memories with our friends to his music. And now we're throwing that away because Kendrick said to. And we're like, yeah, F Drake. It's like, your man, he's a pedophile. All rich men are creepy. Drake is not alone in this. So if you just want to boycott every celebrity and rapper and musician, fine. But don't act like it's just a Drake thing. And also, Kendrick's music can stand on its own 2 legs. I didn't really love it. Another criticism, I guess. I didn't really love the fact that he needed to turn the whole thing into like an anti-Drake meme. Dude, play your good songs. All you do is win Grammys and awards. You have amazing music. Rise above it a little bit. I don't know. He can do what he wants. Monday mailbag. I will answer your questions. GrantBills21@gmail.com next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Because the mail never stops.
Charles, we'll be writing to you.
She's got mail. That's the name of the book.
That's it, honey. There's never a let up. It's relentless. Every day it piles up more and more and more. You gotta get it up, and the more you get out, the more it keeps coming in.
The Monday mailbag. Always a fun way to wrap up a Monday show. The idea is we can address certain topics, different things that don't naturally come up in our sports conversations. So I always say, look, if you have a sports question, you can ask it. But if you just want to talk sports, we'll do it in the first hour and 50 minutes of the show. That's what the show is for. It's the Wisco Sports Show. That's what we've been doing. So if I get to the last 10 minutes here and someone's like, what do you think of the Eagles win? That's what we've been doing. We've been doing that up until now. So you can ask about what you want, but I'll get frustrated if I open up the mailbag here. GrantBills21@gmail.com, and I see a bunch of questions like that. All right. We'll start with Tyler in Massachusetts. Appreciate you, Tyler. Says, hey, Grant, can you describe in detail the best thing you ate in New Orleans? This is a two-parter. Part number 2 is, who is the biggest media member / celebrity / athlete that you saw last week on your trip? I'll start with the food. Best thing I ate. And it's a long list. But I must say, char-broiled oysters. And I like raw oysters as well. I'm still kind of confused as to what they are and how they're supposed to make me feel when I'm eating them. I had raw oysters last April for the first time in San Diego. You slurp them down. Fresh, pretty good. But man, you throw those hogs on a grill, little Parmesan cheese. They bring them to you, they're bubbling. Wash them down with a couple martinis. You can also put a little crab. Some places put a little crab meat on top of there. So good. Like a completely different food to fresh oysters. Close second, best thing I ate. I went to Le Petit Grocery with Pete Bukowski, and we had blue crab beignets. Those things were also delicious. So that's a close second. All the entrees were great, but those are the two things that come to mind. The biggest media member or celebrity, I saw Cowherd. That was pretty cool. Taller than you would expect, but a long list, a very long list of people. Josh in Menominee says, spending back-to-back Super Bowl weeks with Bill and Mike. Both seem great in different ways. Who is the best to share a house with and why? Rank them even if it's 1A and 1B. The towel cleaning story at night, that was funny. Okay, so I love both Mike and Bill. If I had to say who is best to share a house with. Now, I haven't done a lot of trips with Bill. I've done a couple. Bill and I are very alike in that even if we're tired or we're pissy about something, it doesn't matter. Like, you still got to get from point A to point B. You still got to do a show. Even if you wake up in the morning and you're tired, there's no sense in taking it out on everyone else. So I think Bill and I are very similar in that respect. Mike just has some idiosyncrasies that I don't know that they make him a bad roommate, just make him an interesting roommate. For example, the towel story that you mentioned. When did I tell that? On Bill's show last week, maybe? Or did I say that? Maybe I told this on this. It all starts to run together. We got home. Mike and I had dinner on Thursday night. Bill went to Cigars with the Stars. I was out the night before. Thursday was like, let's just go get a bite. I hadn't had etouffee yet. I wanted to try that. And then let's go home. I want to get in bed like before midnight. So Mike and I did that. We got home. When we got home, I walked down to the beach because our house is on the beach. And I wanted just like, fresh air, unwind. I'm a Pisces. Sue me. I like walking by the water. I get back into the house. It is now 10 o'clock. And I'm like, all that's left to do is to take a shower and go to bed, because I shower every night right before I go to bed because I like to feel squeaky clean in the sheets. We can talk about that more at a different time if you need more details. I go in the house, and at 10 p.m., Mike is like, hey, I'm washing our towels. I just put them all in the washer. Every towel in the apartment, in the house. Every single one. Mike, first of all, that towel could have my own poop on it. And at a certain point, this is an exaggeration, of course. At a certain point, I don't care. Like, I just want to take a shower and go to bed. And I'm going to wash the towels. Mike, they're going to be in there. This is a 90-minute process. So now you've taken the towels. How am I supposed to get ready for bed? Also, Mike, who again I love, and this is in jest, he likes to work deep into the night. So 4 o'clock in the morning, I wake up, I roll over, and I hear Mike through the floor. 3, 2, 1. The Bucks knocked off the Atlanta Hawks. The Bucks knocked off the Atlanta Hawks. He's just down there cutting liners. At 3 in the morning. 4 in the morning. I'm not exaggerating. 4 in the morning. It wasn't 12:30 that I'm exaggerating for the purposes of this story. 4 in the morning. So I guess I would say Bill. I think Bill and I are very alike in the way that you just gotta get the show done. Even if you're tired, even if you're hungover, even if you're not feeling good, you got to get it done. And Mike is that way too, but Mike is just up in the middle of the night and washing towels and things like that. Tomorrow, we will be back to rehash all of this, further talk a little bit more about the Packers, I think, and kind of continue to get back in the flow of the week. Thank you for listening. Podcast will be up in just a little bit.